Imagine a machine so large it has its own zip code, a vessel that moves 100,000 tons of steel through the ocean at highway speeds and never needs to stop for fuel. Not for years. A floating city capable of launching a military strike from anywhere on Earth without asking permission to enter anyone's airspace. Most people look at an aircraft carrier and think they understand what they're seeing. They don't. What you're about to hear are 35 facts about aircraft carriers that are completely real, and yet will make you question whether something this extreme should actually exist. 35. It's longer than the Empire State Building is tall. The USS Gerald R. Ford, America's newest and most advanced carrier, stretches 1,092 feet from bow to stern. The Empire State Building stands 1,250 feet. Place it on its side, and the carrier almost matches it. Almost. 34. The deck is nearly 5 acres of open space. The flight deck alone covers roughly 4.5 acres. That's enough room to park 100 school buses side by side and still have space left over. And they fill every inch of it with aircraft worth hundreds of millions of dollars each, sitting wing to wing. 33. It weighs more than 100,000 tons. Fully loaded, a Nimitz-class carrier displaces over 100,000 metric tons of water. That's heavier than 67,000 average cars. Stacked in the ocean, moving. 32. It takes 12 decks to understand the height. The ship rises approximately 20 stories above the waterline. The island, the command tower on the right side of the deck, reaches even higher. Pilots use it as a visual reference during approach. From a distance, it looks like a building standing alone in the sea. 31. Over 2,500 compartments below deck. Beneath that flat flight deck is a labyrinth. More than 2,500 individual compartments, rooms, corridors, passages, machinery spaces, connecting over 4 miles of internal passageways. Sailors new to the ship are known to get lost for days. That is not an exaggeration. 30. The anchor chain links weigh 360 pounds each. Each individual link of the anchor chain on a Nimitz-class carrier weighs 360 pounds. The chain itself, not the anchor, just the chain, weighs over 30 tons. 29. The propellers are the size of houses. Each of the 4 bronze propeller blades on a Nimitz carrier is over 21 feet across. A single propeller assembly weighs roughly 66,000 pounds. These blades spin underwater, invisible, pushing 100,000 tons of steel at speeds that would embarrass most cruise ships. 28. It costs more than a space program. The USS Gerald R. Ford cost approximately $13 billion to build. That is more than the entire NASA budget for multiple years running. And that's before you add the aircraft, weapons, crew, and the fleet of ships that have to travel alongside it just to keep it safe. If you're finding this unbelievable already, hit subscribe. It gets much stranger. But the size, as extreme as it is not the most unbelievable part. 27. 0 to 165 miles per hour in 2 seconds. When a fighter jet launches off a carrier, it goes from a complete standstill to 165 miles per hour in approximately 2.3 seconds. That acceleration is roughly 4 to 5 times what you experience on the fastest roller coaster on Earth. Pilots describe the launch, called a cat shot, as being violently thrown forward by a giant fist. 26. Steam catapults use 615 pounds per square inch of pressure. Traditional carriers use steam-powered catapults that generate enormous pressure to hurl aircraft off the deck. A single launch expends enough energy to power a small neighborhood for several minutes. The Gerald R. Ford replaced steam catapults with electromagnetic ones, which can be tuned more precisely and launch aircraft faster. 25. The runway is only 300 feet. A commercial airport runway is typically 8,000 to 12,000 feet long. A carrier's usable launch strip? Roughly 300 feet. Without the catapult, no fixed-wing military jet could get airborne in that distance. The catapult isn't assistance, it's survival. 24. Landing is statistically the most dangerous routine act in aviation. Carrier landings have been called the most dangerous 2 seconds in aviation. A pilot approaches at over 150 miles per hour, descending toward a deck that is pitching and rolling in the open ocean, at night, sometimes in complete darkness. They have one chance, one wire to catch. If they miss, they must immediately go to full throttle and try again. This maneuver has a name. It's called a bolter. Every carrier pilot trains for it. Every carrier pilot dreads it. 23. The arresting wire absorbs 20 tons of force. When a jet's tailhook catches one of the arresting wires across the deck, That wire must absorb the full kinetic energy of a 50,000-pound aircraft traveling at 150 miles per hour. It stops the jet in less than 2 seconds. The wire stretches under the force and then snaps back. The wires are inspected, replaced, and stress-tested constantly. They are considered critical flight equipment. 22. Pilots land using 3 degrees of glide slope. Commercial pilots use a 3-degree approach angle to land at airports. Carrier pilots use exactly the same angle onto a moving, pitching deck in potentially zero visibility, often at night, guided by a single set of lights called the Fresnel lens. If the light appears too high, they're too high. Too low, they're about to hit the back of the ship. The correct position gives a single steady amber light. Pilots call this amber light the ball. Losing the ball on approach is a signal to execute a bolter immediately. 21. Night carrier landings are considered the hardest skill in all of military aviation. Day carrier landings are described as hard. Night carrier landings are described differently. Former Navy pilots who have flown combat missions, test flights, and experimental aircraft consistently name the night carrier landing as the single most challenging thing they have ever done in a cockpit. One carrier pilot described it this way: "You are alone, fast, in the dark, over black water, falling toward a moving stamp. And this is only scratching the surface." Subscribe so you don't miss the rest, because what happens inside this ship is just as extreme. 20. Over 5,000 people live on board. A carrier strike group at full deployment carries approximately 5,000 sailors and aviators. That is larger than many small towns. The entire population lives, works, sleeps, and operates in a space that, while large by ship standards, is remarkably compact for a functioning city. 19. The crew sleeps in racks 3 high. Personal space aboard a carrier is measured in inches. Most enlisted sailors sleep in racks, narrow bunks stacked 3 high, with a small storage compartment beneath the mattress for all personal belongings. The curtain you draw closed is your bedroom door, your privacy, and your psychological boundary from the world. 18. The ship bakes thousands of loaves of bread daily. Feeding 5,000 people 3 meals a day while at sea requires industrial-scale logistics. The carrier's galleys operate continuously, baking thousands of loaves of bread every single day, alongside thousands of pounds of food across every meal. 17. The ship produces its own drinking water. Nuclear carriers do not carry stored freshwater for drinking. They make it. Distillation plants aboard the ship convert seawater into potable water, producing hundreds of thousands of gallons every day. This means the carrier doesn't just carry its city. It builds part of the infrastructure that city needs to survive. 16. A full deployment lasts 6 to 8 months. When a carrier deploys, the crew does not return home until the mission is complete, and that mission typically lasts 6 to 8 months. No extended shore leave, no trips home. The ocean becomes the only world the crew knows for the better part of a year. 15. There are dentists, doctors, and surgeons on board. A carrier at sea cannot divert to a hospital, so the hospital comes with it. Fully equipped operating rooms, dental clinics, intensive care facilities, and medical staff capable of handling trauma, surgery, and emergency medicine, all embedded inside the ship. 14. The noise level on the flight deck can cause permanent hearing loss in minutes. Jet engines at full power generate approximately 130 to 140 decibels of sound. Without protection, permanent hearing damage can occur in under a minute at that level. Every crew member working on the flight deck wears hearing protection. The colored jerseys worn by deck crew are not fashion. Each color designates a specific role and a specific risk. 13. It runs on nuclear power with no refueling for 25 years. Nimitz and Gerald are Ford-class carriers are powered by 2 nuclear reactors. These reactors do not need to be refueled for the operational life of the ship, approximately 20 to 25 years. No oil, no gas, no supply tankers for fuel. The carrier is, energetically speaking, self-sufficient for a generation. 12. The reactors generate 260 megawatts of power. 2 reactors aboard a Nimitz-class carrier together produce approximately 260 megawatts of power. That is enough electricity to power a mid-sized American city. All of it is used internally: propulsion, aircraft systems, weapons, lighting, water production, air conditioning, communications. The carrier consumes everything it generates. 11. The ship carries 3 million gallons of aviation fuel, even though it doesn't need fuel for itself. The nuclear reactors power the ship, but the aircraft need jet fuel. Carriers store approximately 3 million gallons of aviation fuel in armored tanks deep in the hull. This fuel is what constrains deployment length more than anything else. Not the ship's propulsion, not its food supply. The aircraft need refueling long before the ship does. 10. The reactor room is one of the most restricted spaces in the U.S. military. Access to the nuclear reactor compartments is tightly controlled through multi-layer security protocols. Only personnel with specific nuclear training, Naval Reactors Program graduates, are permitted in reactor spaces. The training pipeline to become a carrier reactor operator is longer and more technically demanding than most civilian nuclear engineering degrees. 9. The ship has no speed limitations from fuel. A conventionally powered warship eventually runs out of fuel. Slower speeds extend range. A nuclear carrier does not have this trade-off, can maintain top speed indefinitely. This changes tactical planning entirely. A carrier can sprint to a crisis and arrive at full combat readiness, without calculating whether it has enough fuel for the journey back. 8. The carrier can be at sea for 90 days without resupply of anything except food and jet fuel. Between nuclear propulsion, onboard water production, and massive stores of munitions and provisions, a carrier can theoretically sustain full operations for up to 90 days without a resupply vessel. In practice, resupply ships come regularly for jet fuel, food, and munitions replenishment. But the point stands, if it had to, the carrier could survive alone at sea for 3 months at full combat capability. Now, if you want to understand how machines like this actually operate as weapons of war, subscribe and stay with us, because the final segment changes everything. 7. It never travels alone. An aircraft carrier does not operate by itself, ever. It is surrounded by a carrier strike group, a formation that typically includes 2 guided missile cruisers, 2 destroyers, a submarine, and a supply ship. The carrier is the most powerful weapon in the group, but it is also the asset every other ship in the group exists to protect. 6. A single carrier can project air power across a 500-mile radius. With the aircraft aboard, a carrier can strike targets, conduct reconnaissance, or enforce no-fly zones anywhere within approximately 500 miles of its position. Move the carrier, and that entire circle of influence moves with it. This is why carrier positioning is watched obsessively by foreign governments, intelligence agencies, and conflict analysts around the world. Where the carrier goes, the threat goes. 5. The US has 11. The rest of the world has 12 combined. The United States operates 11 nuclear-powered supercarriers. Every other nation on Earth combined operates roughly 12 carriers, and most of those are smaller, conventionally powered, and carry far fewer aircraft. No other country has ever built anything in the same class as a Nimitz or Gerald R. 4. The ship carries enough weapons to fight a small war independently. Beyond its aircraft, a carrier battle group is armed with Tomahawk cruise missiles, anti-aircraft missile systems, close-in weapon systems for last-resort defense, and anti-submarine capabilities. The carrier itself carries over 2,500 tons of aircraft ordnance, bombs, missiles, and ammunition, stored in armored magazines deep in the hull. 3. Foreign governments track every carrier movement in real time. U.S. carriers are some of the most closely monitored assets on the planet. China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea all dedicate significant intelligence resources to tracking carrier locations continuously. When the U.S. moves a carrier toward a flashpoint, it is not a secret. It is a message. 2. No aircraft carrier has been sunk in combat since World War II. The last American fleet carrier sunk in combat was the USS Hornet in 1942. In the 8 decades since, the combination of carrier strike group defense, electronic warfare, and air superiority has made these ships effectively invulnerable in any real-world conflict the U.S. has entered. The most dangerous threat to a modern carrier is not a surface ship. It is a submarine, and that is precisely why submarines accompany every carrier group, to hunt the threats that hunt the carrier. 1. The ship's name is not the most powerful thing about it. There is a tradition in the U.S. Navy. When the question is asked, where are the carriers, it is never asked out of curiosity. It is asked in crisis, in conflict, when options are running out and decisions need to be made. For 80 years, the answer to that question has shaped the outcome of global events. The carrier is not just a ship. It is a statement, a permanent, moving, fully armed statement that one country has chosen to project its power not by defending its own borders, but by placing a floating fortress anywhere it chooses. There are machines humans build to perform a function, and then there are machines humans build to define an era. The aircraft carrier is the largest warship ever to sail in continuous operation. It is powered by energy released from splitting atoms. It launches aircraft that travel faster than sound. It feeds, houses, and supports 5,000 people simultaneously in the middle of the open ocean for months at a time. And it does all of this while being a weapon. Engineers who worked on early nuclear carriers were told they were building something that would make war so expensive, so asymmetric, that no rational power would risk provoking the country that possessed it. Whether that calculation has held is a matter of history. What is not a matter of debate is this: no single object built by human hands concentrates more engineering, more logistical complexity, and more raw military consequence into one place than the aircraft carrier. It is not the future of warfare. It is the present of it. If this changed how you see military power, like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who thinks war is simple.